Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 116th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today's topic is looking presidential, and that can mean a lot of things. Looking, acting, sounding like people's opinion of what a president should look, act, and sound like. So we're going to discuss that. Today's panel, beginning on my left, is Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council. On her left is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. On his left is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. We're going to start with Patty Haskins this morning. Patty, what does it mean to look presidential?
Well, as you mentioned in your opening, it's going to be my opinion of what and Bryan's might be different, and Ron's might be different, and so forth. And you also talk about looking presidential when you can also counter that with being presidential, and perhaps those are two different things. In my mind, looking and being presidential is a president, first of all, that is a leader, that can get things done in office, can lead by example.
Or at least give the impression he's getting things done in office.
No, get things done in office.
All
I think there's a difference. Just not giving the impression is not necessarily being presidential in my mind.
Okay.
They need to set an example and be a role model for other politicians, whether it be the Senate, whether it be the House, showing them how government can work. I think that the person in that position who is presidential has a knowledge of facts involving government operations on all areas, whether it be national security, foreign relations, the economy, domestic policies, all of these things that are involved, the environment, everything. And if not able or not being the expert in each of those, which no person is an expert in all areas, have surrounding them people that are considered experts in that field.
And listen to them.
And that was my next point, someone who actually listens to them. I think it is someone that can speak in a tactful and measured way. What the president says not only influences what happens in this country, but what happens in the world. An inappropriate statement can trigger problems with other nations, be it trade, be it war. That president, and it's not that the president has to tell us everything. There are so many things involved with national security, or if in the midst of a negotiation, could blow up that negotiation if the wrong thing is said. But they have to be truthful with us, with what they are able to say, and to say things in a tactful and measured way that tends to make us, that once will allow us to believe them and respect them, and then hopefully follow those policies that they're setting forth.
Okay, do you think that every now and then a president is within his rights and within the realm of looking presidential to be just blatantly honest, no matter how bad it sounds? I'm thinking about Ronald Reagan saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall."
Yeah.
And all of his advisors that he listened to told him, "Don't say that."
But that was a very reasonable thing to say, and
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, that's what
I
my
think there
question
are
is.
points where a president has to be forceful and exert pressure. It's how they do it, when they do it, and where they do it.
Okay.
And you have to look at the consequences. That's why you need an intelligent. I mean, I don't want a president standing there telling me I'm smarter than everybody. I know more than anybody. I want to be able to listen to them, and by their actions and their presence and their deeds, be able to discern that for myself. They don't have to be standing there telling me how good they are and what their accomplishments are. I expect them to do more than that.
Bryan, do you think a president should have nicknames for people?
Well,
Like Rocket Boy or?
yeah.
No.
You know, I think what's unfortunate is that the image of what the media has created as to what is presidential has sort of clouded, you know, our ability to look back at other presidents. You know, LBJ had a pretty salty tongue. I a year or so ago went down and went to his ranch, and they had recordings of telephone calls that he made to different people. And they knew that everything that he was being said was being recorded. And they knew that. And, you know, he was pretty,
Yes.
he laid it right on the line. And it wasn't a cleaned up version. And so I think what has happened is that, and I agree with Patty, that's the type of person you want. But we've gone away from the citizen servant. Okay, and because of that, we're looking for someone that has been groomed within the bureaucracy. We're looking for a senator that's been there for 15, 20 years, a congressman. We're looking for someone that's been in the service of the government, like a George Bush, who was in the CIA and all that kind of stuff, to take over the helm of this organization that has now become, in and of itself, a life of its own. And I don't believe that's what the Founding Fathers expected of the government when it was formed and George Washington was sort of pressed into service to be the president. You know, they wanted him to be the king. And he said, no, we're not having kings here, I'll be the president. And then as, you know, they would go to Washington, do their business, and they would go home again. And they would work their farms and their plantations and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't a full-time, 24/7, you know. Yeah, exactly. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. But it has grown to this organization that is, I think, and it's sometimes totally out of control.
You're talking about the entire executive branch. Huh?
I'm talking about the executive branch. I'm talking about all the different departments that report to it. That, you know, we turn to these professional managers that are, you know, pretty smooth in their delivery. It's kind of like an act. When they turn on the cameras, you know, all of a sudden that person becomes presidential or that person becomes senatorial, and they give us what, you know, the media feels that's what we want.
Do you think it hides the actual, I mean, there's a difference between style and substance. Do you think that the presidents up until lately have perfected the style to the point where we don't know what their substance is?
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, you don't have to go, I mean, Ronald Reagan was a governor of California. He was an actor. And he knew how to play to the camera. He knew what to say, when to say it. He hit his mark, and he looked very presidential. And if you read books, you know, Nancy was behind him, you know, basically saying, okay, this is how it has to be. These are the words you need to say. And all these speeches and everything they put out, all those words are tested. So when you brought up about Gorbachev tear down this wall, that was pretty, at the time, that was inflammatory. I mean, because we were trying to nurse this relationship with Russia, and finally we were getting somewhere with it, and all of a sudden, Ronald Reagan comes along and says, you know, throws down the gauntlet.
Yeah, calls them an evil empire.
Exactly, exactly. And every diplomat out there has got their hair on fire because what is he doing? You know, we're setting us back when he was pushing us and in the relationship to say, listen, these are some things that are just unacceptable. Yeah. So I agree. We want somebody that is skilled, intelligent, understands things. I'm not sure if we need somebody that has been born and raised within the government. I struggle with that because it cuts out a lot of people.
But you're setting aside experience, and the experience can be not necessarily just government, but you know, if you're
as a leader,
as you know, as a leader, when you talk about the executive office, I mean, if you're the part of the Energy Commission, shouldn't you have some sort of knowledge in science? And
sure,
if you're part of the, you know,
or experience with an energy company.
But we have,
yeah,
but see, the thing is, we have hired professionals that have all that experience, and sometimes you have to have somebody that comes in from the outside.
That doesn't know anything.
No, they know things. They know how to be leaders. They know how to be leaders, but they don't have to be, born and raised within the organizations. A lot of successful companies, when they look for a CEO, sometimes they have to go outside of that business.
Yes, they do.
Okay, I understand what
They
you're
have
saying.
to go outside
And
of
they've
that
been very
business
successful in that.
to affect change. And I think what has happened is we're struggling now. And trust me, I don't want anything that I say to be an endorsement of some of the behaviors of our current president. Okay, but what has happened is the media has now basically all of a sudden woken from this 8 years of slumber and decided that now we have to be the press and the media that we were supposed to be, and they're reporting every little thing that happens. I just think that let's separate the stuff from where we're at, and it's easy to draw these comparisons between a Donald Trump and a JFK, or a Donald Trump and a George Bush. People are starting to like George Bush #2. I don't know if you saw that poll. His numbers have gone through the roof. Everybody's now pining for Mitt Romney when Mitt Romney wasn't pure enough. You know what I'm saying? So I've gone on long enough. I'm sure Ron has some.
I can't really disagree with Bryan on most of this anyway. But John, I think you set me up. I mean, all I have to do is say, look at Trump and his opposite.
You would say that.
But that's
Dollar substance.
that's too. Perception is very important, and it's as Bryan says, if you're not careful, the sound. Yes, that's true. That's true. You have. I agree about sometimes you have to go out. I think experience plus and a minus. Maneuver around Washington, and it's I just want to see some human qualities that are human qualities. There's family good ones and really bad ones, at least as far as we know. And the Obamas were good. The Bushes both were the Clintons and Jack Kennedy. Like that. I want to have not to lie to me. You can all the time, but you have to tell the truth if you need to, but you have to tell the truth.
I'm wondering, do the actually accept any truth?
Does anybody today? Even if it's true.
Well, I think Jack Nicholson made, and true. There are some things that the public let that information sort of see. Just throw it out there.
Exactly. I mean, you have to.
So I
Have to
think
be discreet about it.
you have to things for security purposes, but we're just finding out that from credible sources, military that were scrambled to. So it's that kind of stuff that come on it. 10 years, 5 years, 20.
Case of the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
You mentioned citizen presidents. Can you have different lifetimes that way?
No.
Since FDR.
Truman, sort of.
Truman was sort of.
That's three of us that agree on something.
Yeah.
Good heavens, me and two liberals.
Jimmy Carter. Mention Jimmy Carter came. The press didn't make much out of him being a peanut farmer, but he had a nuclear background. He was in the Navy. He was a nuclear officer. He was very smart. He might not have been that deft at handling the economy. If you can remember what we were in, the stagflation and some of the issues back in the during his presidency, but
he managed to have triple-digit inflation, unemployment, and interest rates all in the middle of a war.
Right.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I can't. Eisenhower, but he came up through the military. He was a general.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. I mean, you need executive skills.
Right.
And you need to demonstrate those in handling it's a big business.
Exactly.
I mean, the executive department is a huge business, and it needs a good manager.
I think that a true president can show that they're not infallible. They have to admit when they've made mistakes. Was it Harry Truman said the buck stops here?
Yeah.
And they have to say, okay, I will take responsibility for this. I have the big shoulders. I am the one. The only way you take credit for actions that you have done and for your pluses is by admitting and taking the credit when things don't go well, and then say, okay, but this is what I'm going to do about it. Now, obviously, you don't want to see those mistakes, so be a lot more than your pluses. But I think that's important. I guess that's one problem I have with our present president, who does not, who passes the buck instead of saying the buck stops.
How about
here.
our last president? He blamed everything on Bush in the first 4 years, and now he's taking credit for the successes of Trump.
I think he took. I think he did say, when it was, he felt it was his fault. I thought he did.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I haven't heard.
And as far as the comment about taking credit, he did hand over a good economy to Trump, and it was a lot better economy than
1.7 growth.
Look where it was when he started. It was a lot better than where he
I
started.
understand it with 8 years
and
before.
they've stated that it takes, you don't turn an economy around like he had presented to him in 1 year.
Yeah, but it didn't
I
help.
give credit to Trump, but
Yeah.
The president doesn't have a lot to do with the economy anyway.
Yeah.
Well, this is getting away from
President.
acting presidential.
But the thing is, I think that we started to move away from this notion of the president when we had some of the things happen with Bill Clinton and his presidency. I think that really pretty much tarnished the image of what you
President
want
as role model.
Exactly. The president as a role model and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I know they're all fallible. I understand that, but I guess I look to the moral character of that individual, and if you can't be honest in what I believe is one of your most sacred oaths and obligations that you make to your wife, I have a hard time believing what you're telling me is actually true. Now, there's obviously some spin that goes along with that, but how do I know that what you're telling me today is actually the truth when you go back to what I think is a very fundamental core issue with being honest with people? And that was where I sort of thought where Bill Clinton, he knew how to play to the camera. He knew all the quips. He knew how to bite his lip. He knew how to look presidential. But when the cameras were off, I mean, some of the things that were going on were just...
I'm glad you mentioned him because he's been a problem. I mean, I did not vote for Bill Clinton. And I think back to something George Will said about him. He's not the worst president we've ever had. He may be the worst president we've ever had, or worst person we've ever had as president. But when I think back to his ability to work with Congress and to compromise, and the kinds of things that he got done, and the kind of government he turned over to his successor, I would look at him in substance and in style, with the exception of his moral weaknesses, as being one of the most effective presidents we've ever had. If I were to be putting together a list of good presidents in my lifetime, he'd certainly be on the list.
It's interesting. I think it's what some people are willing to accept. I just saw a report just in the last couple of days, and it was the National Evangelical Council or whatever. And they were questioned as to, okay, all this information about Stormy Daniels came out about President Trump. And of course, he does have a history of that. Are you still willing to accept it?
History of what?
Pardon me?
A history of what?
Of sexual misconduct, I think.
Was that misconduct? He was single at the time, wasn't he?
No, he was married and his wife had just delivered a baby.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't
still trying to
know
get
when
to
it
the
was,
bottom
but
of that.
Yes.
both he and Stormy have denied it.
No, it's, yeah. And the fact that he was dating Marla Maples before
Plausible
he was,
denial.
he has a history of this.
Well, it's an old argument,
and,
though,
and
really.
so, a lot too. They said, well, we have a, and they said, oh yeah, we can overlook it. Everyone deserves a second chance.
I remember having an argument
which
with
is
my
interesting.
father-in-law many years ago. We were watching a TV and Frank Sinatra came on and sang a song. And my father-in-law, who is a Presbyterian minister, said, he's a terrible person. You really shouldn't. And, Frank had a rather spotty reputation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
But what
look
a
at the
musician.
artistic ability this man has.
Yeah, and that's what you cared about. I feel the
That's what
same
you
way
cared about.
about Barbara Streisand. I'm glad I live in the same time period as her because she's a marvelous, marvelous performer.
Yes.
Outside of that, can't stand the woman.
Right.
But that's not important to
That's
me.
not important. That's
I'll
not-
listen to her
Yeah.
sing.
So I guess you could say Donald Trump and Bill Clinton have been sort of cut out of the same cloth. Except Mr. Trump doesn't have a press that's willing to go along
Yeah.
with his weaknesses, let's say. Because, we can bring up all day long issues with Mr. Trump, and you can go tit for tat with Bill Clinton.
Probably.
I mean, we
Sure. I would
lived
agree.
we lived through that.
There was a psychologist one time who made a statement that probably the only two presidents that have not had extramarital affairs is Nixon and Truman. But
Yeah,
everybody
Nixon had a
else
good
had. Well,
family
I mean,
life.
look at Kennedy. He was. I mean,
Well,
of
yeah,
course,
Eisenhower.
the press covered it up for him. but-
FDR, all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a big, Bill Clinton, he did a lot of great things. He was willing to negotiate, and he would basically be sort of just a little bit center left, a little
He was
bit.
very moderate. Yeah.
Yeah. So when it came to businesses, when it came to, it was a rip roaring. I remember it, because I lived through it. It was a rip roaring economy. Things were going really well. He was doing all the right things, and he hadn't politicized. He didn't vilify corporate America to get to where he was at. He knew how to negotiate with people. He knew how to get along. Everybody. I've never met him, but everybody that's ever met him has said that he makes you feel warm and genuine. He makes you feel as though he's interested in what you're saying, and he listens.
Now that's all part of being presidential, isn't it? I mean, you have to care about other people, and
Or at least make
and
them
I've heard
think
it said
that you care about other people.
I've heard it said about him that when he's talking to you, you feel like you're the only person in the room.
Yeah.
And yet there were those that called him Slick Willie.
Yeah,
Because they felt they were being shined on by the used car salesman.
Right.
No offense to used car salesmen. That's the.
What comedian was it that said sincerity? If you have that, if you can fake that, you really haven't many.
Yeah.
So I think maybe we need to give Mr. Trump a little bit of room, because I've heard some stories of his compassion, firsthand stories that we don't have time to go into, but people have related to me situations and experiences that they've had with him.
Yeah.
And he's a very compassionate person, and he cares for his employees. And this, the persona that he puts on for TV and all that kind of stuff. But, so I guess, even though I'm not a big fan of his, I want to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, because people that I know have actually met him and have had dealings with him, and they say that it's very different. He's a very compassionate person. He listens to people. I mean, you don't get to where you're at in being a tyrant. So
it's awful early to make a judgment. It's only been a year. Obviously, his behavior is outrageous. The kinds of things that he says and the things that he calls people, and all of that. But the substance of the man is too early to tell. But so far, it looks very good.
I just, and he's not going to change. I just wish he wouldn't just throw things out.
Oh, me too.
Off the
Right
cuff.
there with you.
Oh,
Because, the thing is, he'll come out the next day and say something, well, that's not really what I meant.
Right.
It's that desire to have
impulse.
the one-upmanship.
The impulse. He
Yes.
has to get control of his
He's
impulses.
I hope that when he wakes up some morning, Mitten, before he sits down to do his tweets or whatever,
Yeah.
looks in the mirror and says, by God, you're president now.
Yeah.
You really have to change some things. But I happen to, if I'm given a choice of style and substance, I'll pick substance. I heard that yesterday that John Kerry is considering running again.
Yeah, I heard that too.
In 2020.
I'm not excited about that.
No, you see, to me, that's somebody that's all style. Gore thought that he was, but he
I thought Kerry didn't have style. I mean, I thought he had substance, but no style. I mean, he was so deadpan when he spoke. Yeah.
We're on opposite sides.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
I can think of a number of descriptions about the substance, but
Yeah.
I think that one of the key elements to leadership is somebody that really feels deep down that they were meant to be a leader, that they have a responsibility to be a leader. It's not a right, it's a duty to be a leader.
Yeah.
I think that our current president definitely feels that. I think the last one did too. I'm not so sure about Bush too.
I think, he needs to inspire people, and he's not. I mean, he has his base, but Trump has not inspired people. Reagan had his take down that wall. George Bush, his moment after 9/11, and his speeches, and he inspired people that got the country behind him. And the ability to do that to me is
But I
important.
think that
But his button is bigger. And it works.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the best inspiration that we're going to get out of him at this stage of the game, is throwing little verbal things back to.
Well, I think that we all agree that style is important. You are what people think you are when you're president. Thank you very much.